Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover Podcast presented by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I'm your host Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
Doing all right. You threw me off by having Charles's name first. That threw off my rhythm. But good to be here, though. Glad to be here after what was a really good win this past Saturday, and the road doesn't get any easier from here. There's still 17 conference games to go, and looking forward to breaking down a couple of them. We have a couple of pretty solid opponents this week.
Yeah, I sat back last Saturday in Coleman, and it really did feel like this was the Alabama team that we were expecting earlier in the year. And there's still some things to work out with with our play from Saturday, but very encouraged for the first game. And we all talked about it beforehand. Not sure how good this Oklahoma team really is. Give them credit going undefeated in the non-conference play. They're very top heavy with Fears and the two guys from the state. But outside that, there just wasn't really a whole lot of talent. Fears got in foul trouble in the first half, and we were just really able to take advantage. But a great way to start conference play, to get a big win, and to really just keep kind of some of the positive momentum that was starting to come out of those finals three games in the non-conference.
Yeah, and we talked about it on our brief post-game show that we had, or post-game space that we had. Um, the first half really felt like an Alabama team that could win a national championship. The Alabama team that everyone had been talking about as, this is the most talented Alabama team that we kind of really hadn't seen up until this point. Um, in the second half, the I won't say it was the as big of an issue as it normally has been throughout the season, but it still was an issue where you get up big, you lose a little bit of focus, you allow Oklahoma to kind of come back. Fears ends up with 16 points, even though you held them to 1 point in the first half, and 15 of those points came with 12 minutes to go in the game, right? You'd been playing well on defense on them all night. You get up by 28, and you end up winning by 28. um, Not that I'm upset about winning by 28 against a top 12 team in the country per AP metrics. Um, but you really kind of hope that, yeah, the killer instinct comes at some point. You know what I'm saying? Where we talked about it ad nauseum on these podcasts and in post game spaces, where it's still, even in the Oklahoma game, you don't see Alabama put their foot down and just run away with it. You do win by 28, so it was a little bit better, but that's a game that you probably could have won by 40 if we're being completely honest, if they stay focused. So um, still some things to work on. Obviously, is improving. The shooting was still a little bit lackluster. You only shoot 31% from three. However, you still put up 107 points shooting, you know, 31% from three, so you can't be too upset about it.
So talking about the second half, and you're right, we scored 59 points ourselves in the second half, but we gave up 50. And it did get, especially the second part of the second half where Oklahoma got in rhythm on offense. There was also some fouls that got them to the free throw line that helped them get in rhythm. But I think about, again, the team 2 years ago with Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney, and that team just played to a certain standard on both sides of the ball, no matter what the score was or what was going on, even if the game was out of reach. I don't think it was till the 14th or 15th conference game in SEC play for that team until they finally gave up 70 points against South Carolina, and that was an overtime game. And in these games right now, it just seems like we do get to a point where I won't necessarily say lackadaisical, but the intensity definitely drops, and we're just out there playing basketball and not playing necessarily to uphold a standard of, we want to keep this team from getting to 70 points or 65 points. We held them to 29 in the first half. We want to hold them below that in the second half. Just competitive fire that you can find other ways to motivate yourself and to continue to finish the game the right way. So there is still some of that is lacking. And that's also just trying to find, the game within the game for us to kind of probably pick apart a little bit, maybe unfairly. But as you dive into the game, did a great job taking the ball to the rim, which is what I've been asking for weeks. And it wasn't just straight line drives or getting downhill from outside. Put guys in post up positions. I think of Jared Stevenson, getting the ball out on the block or backing a guy down to the block and hitting a couple jump hooks, just really close looks. And I know the staff has talked about, Jared's defense. I know there's some of the metrics out there that talks about how good he is on the defensive side. I feel like I really saw that against Oklahoma, just how good he is or how good he can be on the defensive side, because he seemed to really lock in and create some havoc and, get some turnovers and some things like that. But the thought process or just the playing style, just getting to the rim, obviously allowed Cliff to get into the game a little bit more, whether it was for putbacks, whether it was for just dropping it off or giving a lob. And then, I still would like to see better 3-point shooting from some of our guys. And, again, Mark Sears is a game where he goes 1 of 6 and Chris Youngblood goes 1 of 5. You hope those trends will go to how we think it should for shooters of that caliber, guys who typically shoot 40%. Hasn't got there yet, but those would be two guys that you want shooting the basketball from 3. So, like you said, all in all, not a whole lot to be upset about of a 28-point win, but some things that if you want to be considered one of the best teams in the country, you would just like to see us continue to tighten up a little bit.
And the good thing about those threes, you're right, Charles. I'd like to see a little better margin than 9 of 29. But the good thing is that I'm liking the confidence that I'm seeing in these guys when they're taking those shots. Yes, they might not all be landing in, but the good thing is, just a couple of weeks ago, a lot of these guys were still off their game. And you were seeing that lack of confidence, and you were seeing just balls being thrown up and not even being anywhere near because they were playing rushed. Now they're taking their time, they're getting good looks, and they're taking it. They're also not dumping off the ball even when they have a good look, which was a pretty rough problem early on. So I like the confidence they're playing with, even though the shots aren't falling. That eventually, if they keep up the confidence they're playing with, those will eventually fall, and that will help them out. Overall, I know we talked about, it wasn't lackluster effort in the final 5-6 minutes of the game, but it definitely wasn't up to the same par as the first 3 quarters of the game. But I still overall really like the effort, particularly on defense, that we've seen over these past couple of games. You're finally starting to see on both ends of the floor the pieces kind of fall together, whether it be an individual like, Cliff. Cliff's been having, these past couple of games have been some of his best, if not his best of the season. But not just on an individual level, also just overall, you're starting to see, the team starting to, pick up the pace metaphorically. Also back-to-back game single-digit turnovers. You're starting to see those sloppy mistakes that were such a huge issue early on. We're starting to see now those issues are still there, but they're growing smaller and smaller, and they're also at the same time coming up with ways to kind of overcome those those issues. Best 2-point shooting team in the country right now, last I checked. So even if the threes aren't falling, they're making up for it in that regard. So overall, like you both have said, it's hard to complain about a 28-point win. But I think that this team is finally starting to get its groove, and it's a perfect time of the year for that to happen.
Give some credit on that 2-point shooting as well, not only to get to the rim, but I think this is an elite rebounding team. And they've kind of shown that several times throughout the year. They got 51 rebounds against Oklahoma, and Oklahoma only got 26. Not only is it an elite rebounding team, but we have not had a team in the Coach Oates era, I do not believe, that has shared the ball better as it relates to just assists per game. It's another game where you had 20 assists. I think we've hit the 20 mark a couple times this year in games, and just thinking about the pressure that puts on other defenses, not only to guard the ball when it's live, but if the ball's moving like that and you do have somebody who puts up a shot, whether it's from three or it's at the rim, again, you still got all that movement that you've got defenders that are trying to find a guy to go box out. And obviously they're not getting to the guys in crimson and white because we are getting good offensive rebounds, getting good putbacks. And then it does seem like on the defensive side that if we can force a missed shot, that's typically the end of possession. We've done a really good job of cleaning up the defensive glass and not letting teams get a lot of second chance points. It's another game that we took care of the ball pretty well too, only having 9 turnovers. And similar to like last year's team, that when you're this efficient on the offensive side, whether it's making shots or as we're talking about getting second chance points, those turnovers are just killers. Like a bad shot, so much better than a turnover, because bad shots sometimes go in. But also, if it doesn't go in, you've got a pretty strong likelihood of getting the offensive rebound and getting another look to get a basket. And going on the road this week, it's going to be very important that we continue to keep those turnover numbers low, and just continue to keep this offense working on a strong, efficient side, and keeping the ball in play instead of giving it to our opponents.
Yeah, and Alabama, speaking on the offensive rebounding, rebounded 55% of their misses, which is just an absurd stat. And to go along with that, only having 9 turnovers, which 3 of those, I was like 3 or 4 of those turnovers came at around like the 10-minute mark of the second half, where it was like 3 or 4 consecutive possessions where the ball just got turned over. Similar to the type of lapses that we've seen versus like North Carolina, North Dakota, when we get up big, and we just start turning the ball over rather frequently. And then they kind of reined it back in. So all in all, if you can rebound 55% of your misses, which just for everyone listening, I don't think that should be an expectation because that's kind of an absurd number to have to accomplish. But if you can rebound around 50% of your misses, it's just going to make your offense that more efficient because you're either going to get a layup, you're going to get fouled, or there's another chance for a 3. And maybe that's why the 3-point shooting percentages are so low, is because we're getting so many shots at it that we have open 3-point shooters and they're just not hitting the shots. But we're getting offensive rebounds, and then we're kicking it back out, and it's making people take another shot. Like I think Mark had a sequence where he took a 3, missed it. We got the offensive rebound. He took another 3, missed it, got the offensive rebound, then took another 3, and then he made the third one. Like that's fine offense, but that is going to skew your 3-point shooting number down because he just took 3 threes and made one of them. Well, you just got a extra 2 possessions because of offensive rebounding. So overall, I don't think anyone could be upset about this Alabama team. I do think that they're one of the best teams in the country currently. And what's scary about this Alabama team is there's so much more room for improvement while already having the 4th most efficient offense. Just think about if the 3-point shooting ever comes around, how much more efficient and how much more dangerous the team can be. And defensively, if those mental lapses, instead of it being, what was it, like 15 minutes of the second half, drop the intensity down to, we're only 5 minutes of the second half where the defensive like intensity decreases, that defensive efficiency number is kind of skewed because of that. If that does come down, then you're looking at like a top 20 defense, I think. Because we were holding them to like 0.78 points per possession, which is a ridiculous number. So all in all, not too upset about the result. Very happy. Now, like Charles said, we do go on the road the next 2 games, at South Carolina and at Texas A&M. So if we want to dive into that one, we can go ahead and get going on that.
Yeah, I've got some numbers on South Carolina. They're coming off a burn the tape game against Mississippi State, losing 85-50 in Starkville. there's probably a few other SEC teams that we could rattle off really tough stretches. But listen to this stretch for South Carolina to open the year for their first 12 games. At Mississippi State, home game against Alabama, home game against Auburn, at Vanderbilt, at Oklahoma, Florida and Mississippi State at home, at Georgia, Texas A&M at home, at Kentucky, Ole Miss at home, at Florida. That's 10 of your first 12 games against top 25 teams, and the other 2 games are on the road at Vanderbilt and at Georgia. That's quite a stretch for Lamont Paris's team to have to take on coming into SEC play. Looking at some of the KenPom numbers, they're currently ranked 74th overall in KenPom. Their offense is 103, their defense is 65th. Not surprising. Knowing a lot from what Lamont Paris built last year, that this would be a team that's probably built a little bit more on the defensive side. I expect this to be a pretty physical game, but getting into some of their players real quick. Guy who's played really well for them is Colin Murray Bowles. He's averaging 15.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, 6'7" sophomore. He's going to be a guy that, I imagine we've got several bodies that we can throw at him. It'll be interesting to see, can somebody like a Jared Stevenson guard him, or is it more of a Darian Reed, Chris Youngblood, Mo Diabate type matchup against him? Jamari Thomas is their leading guard. He's averaging 12 points a game right now. And then a guy that we're very familiar with, Nick Pringle, averaging 10 points, 6 rebounds a game, kind of rounds out their guys that are in double-digit scoring. One bright spot from them from the Mississippi State game was Zachary Davis. He led their team with 22 points. He's typically a guy that averages about 8 to 9 points a game. So I'm interested to see if he can kind of continue that into our game, or if we can, be aware that he's a guy that's played pretty well recently and not lose him as far as it is the defensive game plan, or get lost if they're, trying to keep him going. State was 27-37 from 2 against them. So another game where I'd really like to see us get downhill and attack the rim. And what I mentioned about this being a physical game, this just gives me the feel of how South Carolina's kind of built and how we're built, that we've got bigs that can play with them, that you could see both teams shooting about 25, 30 free throws each by the time the final buzzer sounds. They're a team that shoots about 69% from the free throw line. We're a team that shoots 70, 71% right now. So can you be a team that shoots better than your percentages? Can you go win a game at the free throw line if needed to? But playing at South Carolina has been somewhat of a challenge for Alabama under Coach Oates. We are 2-0, but we've had really good teams playing South Carolina teams that are probably not as good in the past, and have been tight games. So this will be a test, and having 2 games on the road this week, if you're going to compete for an SEC regular season championship, cannot have weeks where you go 0-2. And we've got another tough game on Saturday, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but be very important to get this game and, again, keep that momentum that we've got against a team that you should be able to handle.
So, got a question real fast. Who in the SEC leads the SEC in true shot percentage? The player. What player in the SEC leads the SEC in true shot percentage?
Is it Murray Bowles? I can see he's shooting 61%. And I see Nick Pringle is also shooting 66, 67% field goal percentage.
It's Nick Pringle.
He also doesn't have a single 3-point attempt on the season.
Yeah. But the reason why I was saying that is, with Nick Pringle being in the program for, what was it, 2 years, 3 years? And knowing kind of his strengths and weaknesses, I would expect Nate to be able to kind of exploit what they saw in practice against him, and really limit his opportunities to get to the rim and get to the free throw line. but I just thought it was an interesting tidbit that Nick Pringle leads the SEC in true shot percentage going into this game. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Joey. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say my one concern in this game is tempo. South Carolina plays a very slow game. I think they're 260th in KenPom in tempo. So not all the way down, but they're not a fast team. And as we've seen with Nate Oates coach teams, they either thrive against a slow team because they outmatch them and they run away with it, or if the other team is able to force them to slow down, that's when Alabama can get pretty reckless. This being I think if this was a game in Coleman Coliseum, I wouldn't be as concerned about it. But with this being a road environment and just with Nick Pringle being on the other side, there's definitely going to be some emotion involved. That's my one concern is tempo. But other than that, I like Alabama in this game. It's kind of hard not to. But like Charles was saying, this is a team that has given issues to Alabama in the past, not necessarily in the loss column, but as far as close games are concerned. And with their pace of play versus Alabama's, if Alabama doesn't kind of establish, the tempo from early on, then it can be a lot closer than I think most of us want it to be.
Joey, you just made an interesting point that I agree with as far as the emotions in this game. And I think a lot of people would look at it not, why would this be an emotional game between Alabama and South Carolina? But what we saw of Nick for those 3 years, very appreciative of what he did for the program, but we do know he's a guy that plays with a lot of emotion. So for our guys, can you keep a level head? Can you not let him get under your skin? Can you just go out there and play basketball? And who knows, it may not ever delve into a situation like that on Wednesday night. But being able to stay calm, stay cool, I think is also going to be very important, especially early on in the game.
I also wonder, because we saw with Mohamed Wagi getting his ring before the game, I'm wondering if they do something similar for Nick. I know they did it with Davin when he was at Wake. I wonder if they do something similar with Nick where they're going to present him his ring, maybe not like a whole production of it, but like a here you go type of thing. I'm curious about that. But speaking on like the pace of play, take a guess what our half court points per possession were for Oklahoma.
1-6.
It's a pretty good guess. It's 161. So, I mean, we did a really good job in our sets and getting to the rim and getting to the actions that we wanted to. Porter Moser said in his post game that they threw every type of ball screen that they could at us, and we were able to, or we were able to fight through any type of defense that they were doing and get to the rim like we wanted to. So, hopefully that trend kind of continues, and maybe that's a sign that maybe pace of play doesn't have that much effect on the team, or at least that's the hope. Um, but I think Wednesday night's a big prove it game for Alabama, like we've been talking about, where you can't let the Oklahoma game stay in your mind at this point. Like the Oklahoma game's done. That's just another result in your book, and you have to keep moving forward to continue to get the results that you want. Especially with Texas A&M looming on Saturday, which should be, I don't know what they're ranked, but um, should be at least a top 15 matchup.
I think
Going
I
in.
think they're 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
They are 10.
Yeah. So top 10 matchup. Which at the same time for Alabama, you can't be looking ahead to that Texas A&M game because as we saw on Saturday, home teams were 7-1 in the SEC. And like Charles said, you can't go 0-2 in a week if you want to win if you want to compete for the SEC championship, which means you have to win some road games, especially this week. So I think this Wednesday game is a very big prove it game, at least for me. Knowing that A&M game that we'll talk about here in just a minute, I'm likely predicting a loss on that one just because we have struggled at A&M. But I don't think you can start conference play 1-2, and then the following week you have Ole Miss and then Kentucky.
Yep.
So it's just my thought.
You're exactly right. You starting out 1-2 would be a quite an uphill battle as far as trying to play for a regular season championship in the SEC.
Yep. We want to move on to Texas A&M.
Yeah, so A&M has bounced back pretty well after, maybe a head scratching loss at this point to Central Florida to open the year. They lost 64-61, and I know Central Florida just got beat by, I think it was 50 to Kansas. But there's actually a lot of similarities in our schedule and their schedule, partly because they did also play in the Players Era Invitational. They also took a loss to Oregon, 80-70, but did get wins against Creighton and Rutgers this year. They also have a win against Purdue, 70-66, and really put it on Texas in the second half last Saturday. I think that game was tied 37-all, and they end up running away with it 80-60. They will actually play Oklahoma on Wednesday night at 8 in Norman before they tip off against us for what will be another 7 o'clock game for them at home on Saturday night. They still got Wade Taylor. Wade Taylor starting to push Riley Norris, it seems like, as far as years in the SEC. Tyrese Radford is no longer there, but they now supplement Wade Taylor with Zurich Phelps, who was at SMU for 3 years, really good player. He's averaging 13 points a game for A&M this year. So really that 1-2 punch that they've had with Taylor and Radford, it's picked up where they've left off by just adding Phelps into the rotation. And then they've got some pretty good bigs, just as far as guys that will be physical, may not be huge threats on the offensive side because a lot of it is going to be run through Wade Taylor and Phelps. But very familiar with Henry Coleman, Anderson Garcia, Solomon Washington. They picked up a big transfer in Pharrell Payne from Minnesota in the offseason. A team that's really had things starting to come together for them. And it's going to be important, in my opinion, from the defensive standpoint. Wade Taylor's probably going to get his. But can you prevent Phelps from having a career game? Or if it's just those two guys, making sure that one of the bigs doesn't also go off, or somebody like Manny Obaseki or Hayden Hefner doesn't get hot from the outside or have a game where they score in double digits. It's going to be another physical game, in my opinion. When A&M challenged us for the SEC regular season championship 2 years ago, they lived at the free throw line in home games. That's where they were able to take a lot of home games from really good competition 2 years by outshooting their opponents, sometimes 15, 20 free throw attempts. So being able to play defense without fouling, but also on the offensive side, Buzz Williams likes to change up his defenses a lot. I think it's really important by the first TV timeout that at minimum you get to the first TV timeout with 2 turnovers or less. That Sears, Filine, just our guys are taking care of the ball, and we're having good offensive possessions, not letting them get runouts, not letting them get points in transition, and kind of trying to keep their crowd at bay, especially on a Saturday night, Texas A&M. This is a measuring stick game, I think, for both teams. Both teams are not in any fear of the NCAA tournament, but this could be a game we look back and, not only competing potentially for an SEC championship, but for a double bye as well. Having this game in the win column and having a tiebreaker could be very, very big. So it's a game that's going to be on ESPN. It should be, probably one of their primetime games of the day. And very excited to see how we stack up against A&M. And just, is it a game that, we hope for a successful result, Columbia, on Wednesday night? Can you put another win in the win column, be 3-0, and be really well positioned going into games against Ole Miss and Kentucky?
What I really like about this game is, like you said, Charles, it's just how they stack up. It's going to be interesting to see how these two teams play against each other and what the game plans are, just because if you look at KenPom, it's kind of funny. The numbers are almost inverse. When you look at Alabama, they're 4th in KenPom in offense, but they're, I believe it's 44th in defense. But then if you look at Texas A&M, they're 40th in offense, but they're 6th in defense. So it's really going to be interesting to see how these guys match up, considering everything they have going on. Looking at their game against Texas, this is a team that's kind of similar to Alabama in they really like to attack the paint. I think they had 48 points in the paint against Texas. So while Alabama, I think Alabama's a better 3-point shooting team than A&M is. These are both teams that are going to attack the rim on both ends. I think it's going to be a very tough game. It's going to be a very physical game. And I'm really looking forward to just seeing, that SEC champ. It's kind of hard to top the SEC championship, win over LSU. But that Texas A&M game was a lot of fun because of it was a clean but rough game between those two. And I'm looking forward to seeing, how it goes this weekend.
Just praise this team for how good they are in rebounding. Every rebound is going to be a war in this game against Texas A&M. Cannot give them second chance opportunities. Taylor's shooting about 39% from the field, and so is Phelps this year. So that means a lot of misses. You've got to be able to clean those up and not let Coleman and Payne and Garcia and guys like that get offensive rebounds and get clean, good looks at the rim, or complicate it even further where they get an offensive rebound, get a putback, and you're out of position and end up fouling them at the same time as well. So this could be a game that really could be won in the rebounding numbers potentially of making Texas A&M a one-shot team, closing out the possession, and then going and running a good offensive set and getting a basket out of it.
Yeah, and for Alabama fans listening to this, I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama wins by double digits on both of these games. I also wouldn't be surprised if Alabama loses both of these games. I know it sounds crazy, but both of these are physical teams that are going to try to slow you down and get you to play the way that they want to play. Can Alabama
And this
break?
isn't the only week we're going to say that. That's just going to be a week in, week out thing in this SEC.
Yeah. Can Alabama kind of break that mold and be able to assert their dominance and assert the way that they want to play with teams? You saw that they did that with Oklahoma. It's going to have to continue to be a trend if they want to be the team that everyone thinks that they can be and the team that they want to be. So you might see us as nitpicking things, but this is when you come into a league that is this deep, you have to nitpick on the small things. Otherwise, like you're gonna lose, right? You can't lose focus. You have to play the way that you want to play to be able to assert that. And so I think this is a big week for Alabama. I know this is only the first true week of SEC play, but I think this is a tone-setting week for at least the next couple on how Alabama is going to play. You started out really good against Oklahoma, and now whether or not you can continue that trend is kind of where I'm hoping to see something this week.
I mean, with how the schedule sets up, we'll be on the positive side and say you go 2-0 this week. So you're 3-0, got Ole Miss at home, Kentucky on the road. Let's say worst case scenario, you split and you go 1-1. I would expect us to beat Ole Miss at home and maybe you lose a game at Kentucky. Well, then you've got Vanderbilt at home, LSU at home, at Mississippi State. Mississippi State's a very good team this year. They've played very well, but it's been a team that we've had some success both on the road and at home. And then you've got Georgia at home, and then you actually have a week off before you go to Arkansas. And Arkansas has shown that they've had some challenges this year. So if you want to really put yourself in a good position and rack up potentially some wins, and with how things may shake out for some of the other teams that early on in SEC play, going 2-0 this week could be huge as it relates to the SEC race at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And also coming out of that stretch at like 9-1 could be big. I mean, you're talking about on the back half, like that gives you room for some errors down the stretch against some of your tougher opponents. So Yeah, I'm excited about this week. It feels like every single game that we're going to be talking about this season is going to be a pressure game. Like it feels like there's high stakes every single game that we play because that's how thin the margin is in the SEC this year. So
It
hopefully we
just
can
means
get
more.
it, yeah, it just means more. So hopefully we can get some good results. And I don't think we're missing anything else. I'll talk about what we're gonna do this week. We'll have a post game space following the South Carolina game. I might be doing that from the car, just because I might be going to the game. And then Saturday night, I want to do a space, but I'm supposed to be going to Huntsville this weekend for a baby shower, my best friend's baby shower, or his wife's baby shower, not his baby shower, um, but depending on that, I might be busy. Also, whether or not the snow holds up or what's going on this weekend in Alabama determines whether or not I'm going. So I will keep you posted on that. But that's kind of our schedule. Did I miss anything else?
Before we shut it down, I do
Oh
want to
yeah.
give kudos to the women's team because they continue to be historic this year. 18 in the country, currently 15-1, off to a 2-0 start in the SEC. Gets a lot tougher this week, where you're at Texas and then you're at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a fringe top 25 team, but then after those two games, the next game is at home against South Carolina. Make sure I got the correct date for that. I believe it's Thursday. Thursday, January 16th at 6 o'clock. Would be great for any Alabama fans that are able to attend that game to be there and support this team. Not just because South Carolina is a good program, but this women's team at Alabama really deserves your support. They've been phenomenal this year. Coach Curry has slowly built this thing for many, many years, and the fruits of her labor are really taking off. I'm really excited about the potential of this team. And when we talk about, SEC expansion and when Texas and Oklahoma came into the league, the two sports that maybe got hit the hardest as far as competition being elevated in all of SEC was probably women's softball and women's basketball, because Texas and Oklahoma are both very historic programs in those respective sports. So um, just really, again, support this team. They're doing phenomenal things, and knock on wood, wherever you got it. But we expect this team to make it to the NCAA tournament, and Birmingham is actually hosting two Sweet 16 and Elite Eight rounds. So, hoping that this can continue to be a magical season for them, and maybe even get some support in Birmingham as they make their march through March Madness. But we want to continue to highlight them as best we can. Get out there to Coleman Coliseum, cheer them on, support them on. I can't praise Coach Curry enough. I just remember being in Tuscaloosa in school in the mid 2000s, and how hard of times that program had fallen on to where it is now. In my opinion, is just remarkable, and I'm very excited for what they've got the rest of the season.
And we also might have a special guest next week in relation to that.
That's what we hope.
That's what we hope. So stay tuned for that news as well. But yeah, be sure to go support the women's team. They're playing amazingly. I think this is the first time since like the 90s or something, or no, 2002, 2003, 2004 that they've started 2-0 in SEC play. So um, just a remarkable job that they've done. But yeah, stay tuned for a potential special guest in relation to that next week. So other than that, I think we're good to sign off. And we'll talk again soon. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Well, Todd.